Julian, you're a materialist. You believe only the physical world is real, and that means that every physical event is caused by a previous physical event in the particles and molecules that make up our systems. How then, because the brain is a physical system, do you get any sort of free will?
The question of how free will is possible in a physical universe is a really, really difficult one. And it seems to me there's only one way, general strategy, which is going to work here, which is to say that whatever free will is has to be made compatible with this idea that everything that occurs is in some sense just the inevitable consequence of what has gone before it. Okay? So you need to understand what free will is. Now, I think this is interesting because people assume the idea of free will is fairly clear and straightforward, and I don't think it is. So here's a typical thing people say, that to say you have free will means that you could have done otherwise, right? Well, in a broad sense, that's kind of true of all sorts of things, but the weather could have done otherwise because of chaotic effects doesn't mean it has free will. But actually, I don't think that is. Now, here's the way I'm looking at it. I've been thinking about it recently. Let's take an example from human life of someone we think kind of expresses human freedom in its greatest potential. Take an artist, right? What could be a better example of free will? Is the artist sitting there consciously controlling what happens next, right? Is it the case that the artist sort of thinks they could have done otherwise, or that's the way it feels? Actually, you talk to artists in the way they work, and what they often say is they don't really even know where the ideas come from. They're kind of generated from processes and so forth. It seems to me that free artistic expression is possible in this world, and yet it doesn't require us to believe anything at all about the ability of the artist to stand back from the normal cause of chain of things, to exercise a conscious control. What then is free will? It has to be some kind of ability to act autonomously and spontaneously, free from coercion and so forth. It's not the ability to be able to, as it were, divorce yourself from the normal causal chains which power everything else in the universe and do an uncaused action.
Look, that's all very interesting, and I think what that comes down to is that you privilege materialistic approach to causation over free will, because as I hear that, I don't hear free will. When the artist has that expression, that I think is a difference. That may be a subconscious, and where it comes from and what their consciousness is composed of is something other than the pure volitional thing that we think, that their expressions come from internally. I think that's legitimate, but perhaps a separate question. The free will, I see it very simply. Do I have to move my hand this way or that way, and is that predetermined in some sense? Can I do it differently than the history of the universe behind me would have made me?
Well, that's the way people frame it, but I think that's an odd way of looking at it, because in a sense, I'd like to turn the challenge around, really, which is, okay, what people say free will is my ability to make a choice irrespective of what's happened before. But then what is this capacity? What is the basis of this? Is it a random thing you're doing? Why are you choosing?
Randomness is not free will.
Exactly.
People who use randomness and quantum mechanics and try to say that's free will, that doesn't work at all.
Exactly. So the question I've got is, I don't really understand what people think free will is. It's meant to be obvious. People think it's obvious what free will is.
Right.
It's not at all obvious to me.
I agree with that.
Explain to me what it means to say, when I move my hand this way or that way, I'm doing it from my free will. People seem to come back to saying something vague, like it's free because I chose to do it, right? But yeah, okay, I chose to do it. Why did I choose to do it? There've got to be reasons behind that choice. Those reasons are the way I am and my history. At some level of explanation, it may just be all to do with the movement of molecules, but that's not the point. That's not the level of explanation which interests us. What interests us is the level of explanation where we think about beliefs, desires. The fact that there's a sense in which these things are all, inevitable is perhaps not the right word, but all simply the consequence of everything that's happened in the past. Well, fine. Either they're that, or they are just random, I think. I don't see what this point between is supposed to be?
Here's how I would frame it. And I think random is off the table. I don't think that's relevant here. Some people think it is. I don't think that works at all. I think that if there is this concatenation, this flow of cause and effect at the explanatory level or at the molecular level in the brain that makes us do it, then by a classic definition, there is no free will. The only way you get free will is to introduce some gap in the system. And some people try to do that physically. I don't see how that works. So for me, I would say if you're a physicalist, there's no free will. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that may be reality, and that's fine. If you want free will, you have to introduce something that's non-physical.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you introduce that, what kind of thing would that be, which would give you a capacity, which would say, great, we have this? Do you see what I mean? Because that's what I don't get.
It would energize, it would actualize some sort of a me beyond what we think of as the physical brain. Now, if you don't think that exists, and I'm not sure that exists, if that doesn't exist, then we're fooling ourselves if we want to think we have free will.
Well, I mean, it seems to me what people are doing is they're gesturing to a general desire for there to be something that we have, which is independent of and autonomous of the physical brain, but they haven't given any kind of positive account of what that thing is, why it should matter that we have it, or anything. It just seems that they're so disgusted or appalled by the idea that it might all ultimately be about the physical brain, they think that without it we're doomed. So I don't want to buy into that.
I agree with that. But I think it's a stark position. I think to try to come up with a lot of justifications how we have a kind of free will if we have a materialistic world doesn't work.
Well, I don't think it's. I think that's unfair because the point is that argument is based on the idea. The reason why you have to talk about kinds of free will is because the version of free will that people claim we don't have doesn't turn out to be important, and we don't have it, right?
It's important to me.
Well, you say it's important to you, but I haven't yet got clear what it is that you've got.
I have this sense that I can do one way or another, and it's not predetermined by some flow of prior atoms. That may be an illusion, but if it's an illusion, then I don't have free will.
Well, I think this is such a complicated issue. It's such a difficult one. There's no way we could be here all day and we wouldn't get it. But you've got to think about what kinds of free will would be worth having. There's no point just saying, do we have it or do we not? We think, what would it mean to be free and what kinds of free will are worth having? I think if you ask those questions, I think there are versions of free will which are compatible with the view that we're not free of the causal inevitability of the universe. I know that's complicated, I know that's controversial. Listen, at the Philosophers magazine, we conducted a poll. We asked a load of philosophers, what are the most intractable problems of philosophy right now? Free will was right up there. So I make no apology for being able to failing to give you a nice, neat answer in just a very short time.